What are your guys' thoughts on the story for Splatoon 1 and 2? Did you actually enjoy it, or did you find it to be pretty underwhelming? I, as well as many others, were not actually a big fan of the story mode in either game. The story mode in both games acted as a way to teach players how to play the game, which is fine, don't get me wrong, but in Splatoon 2 we kind of hoped the story was going to be a bit more than just a tutorial. But nope, we were wrong. I've even seen people recently saying that they found it to be so boring that they didn't even finish it at all. So today I want to talk about my problems with the story mode and the hope that Splatoon 3 doesn't follow the same path, resulting in yet another boring tutorial mode. So let's just get right into it. When Splatoon 1 was coming out, people were actually not expecting any sort of story mode or a single player mode really to speak of. The trailers were all focused on the multiplayer aspect, but sure enough it did have a single player mode. As a game that was purely focused on online multiplayer, it was fair to assume the single player was going to take a back seat and not have as much attention put into it. But surprisingly, they put quite a bit of effort forward. As the story continued on, it became more obvious that the story was pretty much only there to act as a way to teach players how to play the game, and didn't really deviate from that. I remember seeing a bunch of complaints on forums about the story never really got difficult or never really asked much of the player. The main reason why someone would want to play a story mode without even knowing the game was that some of the weapons were only unlocked by playing the single player. Splatoon 2, people had hoped the story would do more, would be more difficult, and would do more than just being an introduction to the game. But sadly, it once again acted as a tutorial. It makes a bit of sense as to why it would act as a tutorial this time. It's incredibly likely that Splatoon 2 was the first game for many people, seeing how the Wii U was, well, the Wii U. For some, Splatoon 2 was their introduction to the series, so the story being a tutorial makes sense. But for people like me, it wasn't exactly ideal for the story to once again not provide any real challenge. That, however, changed when we got Octo Expansion. Being a story expansion, they had the opportunity to really hone in on what made it something different. The game had been out for a while, and thus they didn't have to teach new players new things anymore. They could do whatever they wanted. Octo Expansion was the story experience I wanted out of both games. While Octo Expansion still has points where it teaches players, specifically the ranked modes are taught through Octo Expansion, it still offers a vastly different experience than the base game did. Levels based around various challenges that allowed people to decide their own difficulty was exactly what I was looking for, and many others were thinking the same. I'd say that Octo Expansion does a better job at being a single player mode than the base story mode does, and it even has less of a story to it. There's also a big challenge everyone knows of at this point, the true inner Agent 3 fight that has been giving players difficulties for a long time even after this point. Going into Splatoon 3, they no longer have to try and teach people the game. One advantage of it being on the same system as the previous entry, as the install base is likely to be similar, if not bigger than the previous entry. A good chunk of your player base will carry over, and you'll have more people that already know how to play the game. Like I said before, Splatoon 2 you could argue it's fine since the tutorial made sense with the install base of the Switch being that of like 10 times the size of the Wii U's, thus making it less likely for a big carryover from the previous game. Splatoon 3 would be the time for the dev team to finally have a story that offered more than to just teach. Have it be more like Octo Expansion while offering more difficulty, still allowing for the player to choose the difficulty they want to play at. It walked a good line of being more difficult while still giving the choice to the player, and that's exactly the sort of thing I was looking for. At the time of making this, we still know very little of what the story does entail. I'd imagine we get some more news as we approach the time that is normally E3. My main hope is that we learn more, and it seems to lean more towards Octo Expansion, as that was my preferred way of playing. I can't speak for everyone, but I'd be really bored with another story that just repeats the same formula as the prior two games, especially after they already gave us something different with Octo Expansion. Perhaps that was their testing grounds for what would become the base of Splatoon 3's story. I'd certainly hope so, because as it stands, the only reason I'd be playing the same dull tutorial story mode as if they once again locked multiplayer content behind beating it like they did with the first game. So that would be a massive regression in terms of game design. Overall, I'd say Octo Expansion was probably the best the games have ever done in a story sense, being unique, difficult, and offering a challenge while still having a way to teach people things like the ranked modes. And I only can hope that that was a testing ground and a way for them to really see how that sort of gameplay loop works and if people actually take to it. And seeing as Octo Expansion is incredibly well received, that would mean the development team is looking to make it more towards Octo Expansion than the previous other Splatoon games. But anyway, what do you guys think? Did you guys enjoy the story mode in Splatoon 1 and 2, or were you like me and found it to be pretty underwhelming? What kind of changes do you hope they make with Splatoon 3's story? Like I said before, it makes sense for them to be tutorials, especially the first game, and you could make an argument for the second game, but as we enter the third game, I think it's only fair to expect something vastly different. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.